Before we begin, the title is written in the right-hand corner of the screen. Enjoy watching. The story begins with the girl Evelyn about to be seriously punished for something she didn't do. She is asked if she admits her mistake so that her conscience will be clear before she dies. Evelyn doesn't know how to explain that she had nothing to do with it and shouldn't be in that place at all, because she's just been set up. The girl said it wasn't her fault, but no one cares. There's no fixing it anyway. At this point, people start screaming loudly to see her crying, screaming loudly and begging for mercy as soon as possible. One of those standing next to her says she has one last chance to confess, but even that won't save her from what they will do to her. It will only help keep her honest for the people she's supposedly deceived. With only a few minutes left, the emotions and feelings that Evelyn is experiencing right now cannot be put into words. Meanwhile, someone of the men asked the child to give the girl something, and as soon as possible it's some kind of jar with something inside that looks a lot like candy or medicine. But judging by the fact that Evelyn has to take it right now, there's clearly something special inside. I wonder who this guy is, and why he's in such a hurry to do it, and not with his own hands so as not to draw attention to himself. He's obviously up to something. One can only hope it doesn't hurt the girl, but instead helps and eases her suffering. The boy began to ask about some return to the past, but really these words connected with what was in that jar. Meanwhile, Evelyn is asked one last time if she will admit to destroying her husband, Duke Daniel, in an attempt to cover up evidence of her infidelity. Daniel Danes, her beloved husband, the girl believes she will learn the truth when she contacts him in the other world. It was a very complicated story where even she doesn't know who destroyed her family and who's behind it. Evelyn didn't have time to find out who did it and who needed to make everyone start reading her as a criminal. All she knows is that if there is any justice in this world, this man will be punished for his terrible deed. When it came time to say her last words, Evelyn said the following: that only God knows the truth, and very soon, everyone will be convinced of it. She's never done anything of yours that she could be ashamed of. So no matter how much people doubt it, her conscience is perfectly clear. Some guy came up to her and started taking her to the place where her life would end. At one point, among all the people, Evelyn notices her mom, standing in the front row, barely trying to hold back tears. The girl does not understand how this can be and what she is doing here. At the same time, she becomes very embarrassed because she would not want her mother to look at something like this. Did a woman come here to stay up all night and see a picture like this? To make her last moments painless as possible. The best thing her mother can do is to turn away and not remember her like this. The girl wants her to remember her sweet and kind daughter, not a person who ends her life like this. They always had a good relationship, and now it's very frustrating to see your mom in tears, with whom they dreamed of a happy future together, which unfortunately will never happen again. At the very last moment, Evelyn looks at all these people and happens to notice Daniel, whose death she is now being blamed for. But how is it possible? Is it possible that someone just looks like this person? Because it seems that such coincidences do not happen. And that's not all. The most interesting thing is that the guy has the same scar on his face as her husband had, except that it looks like a betrayal, and it's very professional and long planned. Almost 6 months after his death, the girl lived a crazy life. Trying to get to the truth and find out the truth, she felt that he was alive and did not understand who needed so much to ruin her life. The complexity of the situation is not only to find the person who really killed her husband, but also that for something, this person needed to take revenge on his wife as well. Evelyn once received an anonymous letter that had no sender's name and no hint of who sent it. It said the following: "Come to the last room in a place on the outskirts of the capital." The room the girl found was filled with traces of the affair. At that moment, Evelyn did not understand what the man wanted to say and why she needed to be here. At some point, a guy approached her unnoticed and addressed her by name. The girl thought she was there alone, but as it turned out, there was someone waiting for her. She turned around, saw him, and just a second later, the two of them heard someone approaching the room. While they had a few moments to look at each other, the girl recognized him as Lord Edward. 3 guards come into the room, and right after that, the guy tries to cover the girl who might have been scared. But that didn't stop them. The boys went up to him and told him they had to do their master's bidding. Eventually, the Lord was apprehended, and that's the last thing the girl remembers from that moment. She never solved it. Meanwhile, once the people had done what they wanted to do, instead of going home, they began to rejoice in the event as if it were a holiday, and called her a witch. And as soon as everyone began to converge, Evelyn realized that the end was not yet in sight. It was as if she was seeing herself from the outside, and realizing that it was not the end. Just a few seconds later, she found herself in some other place, grabbing herself by the neck and trying to breathe at least some air. There's a lot of people around and a very different atmosphere from what she just saw. She knew immediately that this was some kind of new life, except whether her familiar people would be with her, or whether it was a whole new world was unclear. For now, the girl is just walking down the street and trying to realize what just happened when suddenly some girl approaches her and offers to buy some flowers from her. She comes to this street every day and sells different flowers to passers-by. But it seems that she is not interested at all. The girl does not know how to pass by, and do it so as not to offend the girl, because she does not even have money with her to buy at least one bud. At that moment, she looks straight ahead and happens to notice a man she didn't expect to see at that moment. It's her ex-husband, Daniel, walking down the street, alive and well. Evelyn couldn't believe her eyes, and of course, after that, she forgot all about the girl. She ran in his direction so she could finally see his eyes and remember how beautiful he was. A few minutes ago, she had seen him in his cloak before his doom, and now he was alive and strolling down the street. Just as it was, the girl runs up, takes his hand, and hopes that from now on, they'll be happy again. Or at least, he'll be happy to see her. She said his name and looked into his eyes, but unfortunately she didn't see any joy in them. He reacted to her as if she was a stranger to him. The guy asked who she was, which means he didn't recognize her at all, or even see her for the first time. Evelyn doesn't understand how to explain to him that they were married and spent most of their lives together. When she heard the sound of a horse, she turned and saw that it was too close to the child. It seemed to her that something like this had happened before, but she didn't remember how or where. She felt a little uneasy at the sight of the horse, though nothing bad had happened so far. After that, she wanted very badly to see him smile, but now he saw her as a strange girl who seemed to have mistaken him for someone else. What we're feeling right now is just awful. It's unbearable to stand in front of someone she loved very much and see that they can't even remember her. Though it's possible the girl has entered a world where they're really strangers, and he has no idea who she might have mistaken him for. At that moment, Evelyn thought that perhaps she had traveled back in time to a time when they had not yet met, and that was why he had reacted so strangely to her. If that's true, the plan is to save the baby from the horse. If that happens, the girl's not wrong. Afterwards, he asks her what her name is, but in response, because of the awkwardness, she still couldn't answer anything. Daniel is getting nervous, and it's no wonder I don't understand what she wants from him, or how he can help her. The girl just dared to say your name and explain what was going on as she saw the horse approaching the child. She didn't stay away and decided to save her. Evelyn remembers very well being in her place when she needed help, and there was no one around, only those who were laughing and waiting for that moment. It turns out this is the same situation that happened a few days ago when Evelyn rescued the princess on the street. She realizes that now this horse is going to hurt either her or this child. So the girl sheltered him with herself and thought that as it will be, so it will be. Just when she's resigned to the fact that this huge horse is now either going to step on or crush them, along comes the savior no one had hoped for. He reacted in time, grabbed them, and saved them at the last second. Except I wonder who that man is. He acted like a real prince. The guy didn't stand by and did what others around him wouldn't dare to do. Once they had moved a safe distance away, apologized that it was very fast, but explained that it was for their safety. Evelyn looked at him and couldn't believe her eyes. But that wasn't all. He knew her name from somewhere, and looked even more like her husband than the man she had mistaken for him. She doesn't know how to react to this or how it's even possible. The girl looks at him and realizes she's even more confused. And this is not the most interesting thing. Lastly, he asked her to be more careful and less in unfamiliar places. According to him, the girl will soon realize what he means. Now, she'd better make sure she stays alive at least for the next few days. It sounds very intimidating, but at the same time, very interesting. Evelyn was afraid to ask him to tell him more about it, because she was sure she would regret it very much later. Then she looks around and notices a lot of guys who look like her ex-husband. She feels like she's in some kind of dream where nothing makes sense. Everything is too illogical and suspicious. The girl was tired of thinking and trying to figure out what it all meant. She wanted to relax and feel protected, at least for a while. She has a lot of questions, but at the same time, very few answers. Evelyn is afraid to say or ask anything unnecessary, which makes her head hurt more and more. But the only thing she's interested in is which of these guys is her real husband, if any. At this moment, the people around her look at her with surprised eyes, for they have heard her address Daniel by name. They thought the guy only advised her to watch her safety because he got really angry and hinted that there would be big problems because of what she called him. But really, they misunderstood and started meddling as usual. Even Daniel is sick of it. He hates being in public places because of it. After a while, a guy came up to the girl. He called her his lady and asked her if she had a free minute. The guy smiled to give a good impression of himself, and unsurprisingly, he also looked like her husband. It turns out he had come up to ask if she was some man's daughter. The girl didn't realize who he meant, so she said her first and last name right away so no one else would have any questions for her. Evelyn said her first name, and as soon as she wanted to say her last name, her eyes started to close. The guy realized that something was wrong, and just a second later, she lost consciousness. The girl fell to the floor, as if she was tired or overexcited. Everyone realizes that something has to be done about it, and you can't leave it right there on the floor in the middle of the street. It would be very ugly on their part. But nobody knows where she lives or who her relatives are, because the girl hasn't had time to give her last name or tell anything else about herself except her name. It turns out the real Daniel is the guy who turned around and started walking off somewhere. This was found out after one of his assistants called him Lord Daniel. He ordered the assistants to take care of the matter and carry the girl to some room, for it would soon be dark and late. The next day, the girl wakes up early in the morning and finds herself in a luxurious mansion, which she had only seen in pictures or newspapers before. She opens her eyes and looks up at the ceiling and sees a chandelier that looks like some kind of artwork. Besides, underneath it is a very soft and equally chic bed. Evelyn feels that this pillow is like a little cloud, softer than which nothing exists. She suspects what this place is, but until she finds out if it really is, she's afraid to even think about it. One of the assistants came over to greet her and asked her how she could help, because morning is the time when assistants are most needed. Evelyn looked at this girl and was surprised, for she had an unusual appearance. She liked her hair, beautifully emerald in color, and very beautiful facial features. At some point, the girl realizes it's the same Charlotte she knows so well. They have known each other for a long time and used to be better not friends. When the girl lost her husband, the helper was always there for her and supported her when she needed it. She understood how much she needed it and would only leave her side for a minute if there was something important to do. Charlotte was the only person she could trust and tell everything that was going on in her life, without fear of anyone else finding out about it. She has very good memories with her. So as soon as she saw her, she felt so much better, like nothing ever happened. But there is one very interesting point. Before, Charlotte did not work, and only sometimes helped the staff when someone did not or could not go to work. And now, she became one of them. The girl looked at the lady and didn't understand why she was looking at her so strangely, as if she was seeing her for the first time in her life. Evelyn remembers that when they knew each other, the girl was in another mansion, and there's no way she could have been right here. Very curious as to how this could have happened, and she seems to have a lot of questions again. Charlotte looks at her and realizes that the girl probably hasn't woken up yet, or perhaps lost her memory for a while. After talking to her, the girl hesitated and realized that she needed to find out what year and date it was, very urgently. Too many strange things had happened lately, and there were questions that were better not asked lest they think she'd gone crazy or lost her memory. At that moment, the door opens and another person comes in. Judging by the voice, the girl realizes it's two guys. They are very happy that she is finally awake. She is fine. They even called her a beautiful lady and asked her how she slept. The one who should be her husband was most concerned about her waking up and being able to come to her senses. Evelyn started to get very embarrassed and said she was very ashamed that he had to waste his time for her not to spend the night outside and unconscious out there all alone. The guy replied that she shouldn't worry about it and admitted that he had accidentally forgotten her name, so he didn't even know how to address her. At that moment, the girl was afraid to tell him even that, for she didn't know whether she would regret it or not. She decided that if there was an opportunity to live those few years over again and make a difference, she would do it. She wants to live this time, the way she's always dreamed of living it. Not being afraid of anything, doing only what she likes and enjoying life. So, Evelyn boldly said her name and told them who she was. She was very interested to see how they reacted, because after that, it would all make sense to her. The two looked at her as if they had heard something amazing. Did they know the name? Or did it mean something to them? As soon as they realized who they were talking to, they quickly realized what they had to do, and suddenly moved even closer to her. One of them drew his sword and treated her like an enemy he'd mistakenly let into his house, which means something interesting starts happening now. At this point, the guy says the real Evelyn died a long time ago, and she's pretending to be her, and trying to fool them. He starts to say that the girl died over 6 months ago, and there can't be another girl in the world with the same appearance and name as the dead Evelyn. She doesn't know how to explain it properly, because most likely, even if she tells the truth, no one will believe her, and it will only get worse. It's very frustrating that she has no reason to deceive her, but whatever she says now, it's going to sound like the ultimate deception. At some point, the most interesting thing started. The guy claims that the girl fell off a cliff, although in fact it was quite different, and she remembers it very well. The girl looked at him with surprised eyes, because she didn't understand who had said that to him in the first place. Either way, he's not going to believe her, at least not until a miracle happens and she can change his mind. Evelyn wasn't afraid, and again repeated that she was who she originally identified herself as. She repeated her first and last name and said she could prove it any way he wished. She doesn't want to die again just because someone didn't believe her, so you have to convince them in a way, even if it's impossible. To make him stop doubting and believe her a little, Evelyn gave his name, which not many people know. Not even the staff knows this information, so it's too early to worry. The guy asked how she knew his name, to which she replied that she had recently lost her memory, so she didn't understand why she was being called dead. Afterward, the girl said she wanted to talk to her father to tell him she was okay. She made Daniel even angrier with that. He doesn't have the patience to think about what she's saying to him right now. He's genuinely convinced that there's no such thing. And since the guy doesn't like it when someone tries to trick him, there's nothing stopping him from getting rid of her right here and now. As soon as the one he came with heard about it, he immediately joined the conversation and tried to protect the girl, because he was very curious to know how a dead girl could suddenly come back to life. He's asking to give her another chance, or ask her to do something that will definitely prove she's not cheating anyone. At least that would be fair and just, he wants it on his conscience and takes responsibility for it. The guy feels it needs to be dealt with and shouldn't be so quick to destroy a person for no reason. Daniel is outraged because he reads that it is a waste of time and that it makes no sense because miracles don't happen, and a person who has died is not able to be reborn and re-enter this world. He has no doubt that he's facing a fraud who's pretending to be someone else, and is clearly up to something. In the end, they agreed that she had about 1 week. If she couldn't convince each of them, Danielle would do the wrong thing. Evelyn said that this time would be enough, and pretty soon, they would be changed before her for not believing initially. The guy who gave her a chance was very surprised, because he didn't expect her to be so brave and think that someone would apologize to her. After that, Evelyn was alone. She was finally able to exhale, calm down, and be alone. Only now she has another problem. She has to come up with an idea how to prove that she is not deceiving anyone. And not only an idea, she has to come up with something that will leave no one in doubt. Either way, she's very glad it all went relatively smoothly, because she's sure that if it wasn't for that guy, Daniel wouldn't have given even a day's notice. All the while, Evelyn was trying to distract herself. She was looking at her room, even the smallest details, to stop thinking about the bad stuff. No matter how hard she tries to calm down and think of something, she still can't do it. Although maybe if it wasn't for the pressure, she would have thought of something long ago. But as it is, everything seems much scarier than it is. Even at breakfast time, despite the very tasty and beautiful food, none of it improves her mood in any way. It turns out this guy who helped her a few hours ago is Daniel's brother, and he's now at the back table with her. He apologized for that situation and said his brother is very rarely in a good mood, and it's going to take some getting used to. Evelyn realized why they looked so much alike, and why she thought everyone around her looked a lot like her ex-husband. It was just his relatives. Even now, he refuses to speak, for he thinks a man who may be a fraud is not worthy to speak to a man as respectable as himself. In fact, she understands him perfectly well. If she were him, she wouldn't believe it either if she met a girl who claimed to be Cordelius's daughter and called herself Evelyn. I'm surprised they even called her over for breakfast instead of just bringing food to her room. The little brother's name is Lucas. He's much kinder and much more trusting of people than his brother. When the girl married Daniel, Lucas went away for treatment due to a serious illness. He was unable to attend the wedding, and soon unfortunately died. She was always curious to know what kind of person he was, and how much like his brother he was. It so happened that she was only now seeing what a difference there was between them, and in everything from their character to their behavior, and more. If they weren't so similar in appearance, people who don't know them or see them for the first time would never think they were brothers. At this point, Daniel did speak up, curious to ask why the girl had pretended to be Evelyn, and not a more unknown girl so as not to arouse so much negativity and suspicion. Evelyn replied that first of all, she is not afraid, which raises a lot of suspicions, and secondly, she is not pretending to be anything, and that she is going to prove it in the near future. Meanwhile, the girl returned to her room and decided that it was time to write a letter to her father. She found a suitable paper and wrote that she had no idea why she was considered dead. After all, she was here, alive, and writing him this letter. She said she was fine, but there was one problem: memory loss, which made it hard to remember things from before. Very interesting what he'll say to that, because it's likely that the man is just as likely as the rest of us to doubt that it's true. Evelyn went out into the corridor and started looking for helpers to help her send the letter, because she can't do it herself. The girl doesn't know who to turn to, and whether she should send this letter at all, because if the relationship with her father deteriorates, it will only get worse. Of course, the first thing she did was start looking for her friend Charlotte, except whether she could be trusted now was a very good question. When suddenly, the girl meets another assistant. She decided to ask for her, because she has no time to look for someone else. The assistant asked if everything was okay and said if it was urgent, she could send it right away. Then she suggested a cup of tea and some dessert, for she saw that the lady was in no mood at all. After that, Evelyn gave her some kind of ring and told her to let it be as a payment for her work. The assistant has never received such a reward, so she doesn't know how to react to it and whether she should accept such a gift. During this time, she didn't say a single word. The woman froze in one place and was speechless. She just didn't have the words to describe her astonishment. And that's not all. She had thoughts that maybe this could be some kind of test or trap, like a staff exam. Evelyn replied that it was fine, and explained that she was used to appreciating other people's hard work, so it was no surprise at all. At some point, she started walking back to her room, no guessing what she might see now. Evelyn stopped, for she heard some sound in the nearest room. She was very curious to see what was going on there, and of course she did so. A girl just opens the door as she hears some guy and girl's declaration of love, which means that it's obviously some couple she trusts. Just a second later, she looks at these people and realizes that the guy's is her ex-husband. She saw him with Charlotte. Amazingly, they forgot to close the door, and didn't think about the fact that someone might come into the room and hear all those noises. Although they probably don't think about that at all right now. She hears them confess their feelings to each other, and his look. He has never even looked at her as he did at this assistant. Words can't express what the girl feels now. She already regretted that she was reborn at all and got a chance to live this life again. Now it's clear why Daniel didn't believe her and didn't want her words to be true. All this time he was in love with another girl, so he doesn't care about Evelyn now. In this moment, the girl hates this man and regrets that she tried to prove something to him, because it would have been better if she had not seen him at that moment and just passed by. She hates remembering those moments when Charlotte knew all her secrets, And now, cuddling with a guy who's supposed to be her friend's husband. Evelyn started to run to her room so no one would see her tears, and especially not that she had peeked through a door that needed to be passed over. In the meantime, maybe everything she's just seen will save her a lot of time, and in just a few days, she'll be leaving this mansion, his, and living a new, happy life. She's faced betrayal again, and there will never be forgiveness. The only thing she has to think about right now is how to get away from here and forget these people. Very interesting what she'll do, and whether she'll retaliate or ruin their lives like they just did. Frandir, the land of glory and purity, it is not customary to do bad things here, such as cheating, which is why people reacted so aggressively when they found out that the girl was involved in the guy's death. The husband, ruling as head, should be a shield and protection for his entire family, and the wife should do everything in her power to keep the family and trust intact. Unfortunately, not everyone succeeds. It is generally believed that if a person cheats on his beloved person, he is punished either by fate or by those who found out about it. So, since it's customary to punish people who do something against the rules, the girl had the choice of punishing them or just silently walking away and living her life. She doesn't know what's best, and the only reason she's not rushing anywhere and still is here. She's afraid of not finding a home and being left with nothing. Now it's clear that even if she finds proof, and it's clear that she's not fooling anyone, the guy still won't believe her, and will make sure that Evelyn is punished in the end. She even had thoughts that maybe, before the moment of her death, he had staged his death on purpose and made people want to get rid of her themselves and call her a traitor. If that's true, he won't succeed this time. Evelyn won't let himself be fooled and can survive either way. Except that it wouldn't hurt to take care of where to find enough money to get away from here and not depend on anyone. Accordingly, she recalls her family who always lived well and never needed money. They were a real noble family who had everything one could dream of, so if she had any access to that wealth now, she would have no problems at all. The girl knows that in the near future her parents are going to die very soon, so she has to make sure that she gets some inheritance as well. If this is not done, she will stay in this house forever or be left on the streets without food or clothing. So she went straight into the office and started looking for documents that could help her with that, because while she had time for that, it should be used and not put off until later, because it might be too late. But that's not all. If she finds information in the documents that backs up what she's saying, she solves two problems at once. He will no longer have the right to doubt her words, and even less to demand something else. The main thing is to find the right documents and present them in such a way as to finally convince everyone. All the evidence she's found is still at the Dane estate, but that's only half the journey. The hard part comes next. In parallel, she began to think about how her ex-husband had tampered with her furniture and was waiting for her to gather evidence so he could clear his father's name after her death, and all of his late wife's property. Everything would become his property. At least he thought so. To make all Cordelia's money his own, he's come up with a very good and foolproof plan. Only I wonder if the girl will be able to screw it up this time. She doesn't understand why she turned a blind eye and didn't see what kind of person he really is. Because behind her back, he was literally planning and ruining her life, and she didn't notice it at all. And the interesting thing is that Charlotte and Danielle have been suspiciously missing together a lot. But at the time, no one even paid attention. It turns out that the rest of the staff knew everything. Charlotte told about her dates and plans with the husband of the mistress. It turns out that everyone knew about it, except the girl who was tried to deceive. Moreover, she was laughed at as if it was her own fault for not noticing anything. Meanwhile, the door opens in the room, and the assistant comes in and asks if everything is okay, even though she's probably just come from a date with her boyfriend. From that moment on, she was disgusted to look into those eyes. Evelyn was getting angry at herself for being so naive and not seeing the obvious. It turned out that it was easy to deceive her. The assistant said she had brought a change of clothes, though really, these things looked like some strange pieces of cloth that hadn't even been washed. Surprisingly, Evelyn had been noticing more and more of these things as of late. At one point, the helper starts asking if there's anything she can do to help. Ostensibly, she can see her friend is uncomfortable, though in fact, She's probably secretly rejoicing in it inside. Hopefully the girl will figure something out and use the great friendship to her advantage. At this moment, the assistant noticed that the mistress was not talking to her and did not even look in her direction. She wondered what happened, so she did not even leave and pretended that she wanted to be near her in such a difficult moment. But at some point, her behavior changed dramatically. The assistant asked why she felt guilty around her lately. She didn't even want to enter this room to avoid seeing the disgruntled look. In response, the mistress asked if all the assistants in this mansion are so rude. From this moment, they instantly had an instant conflict. It was like they had been waiting for this moment for a long time, especially the assistant. She even smiled and was happy that finally, no need to create a cute smile on purpose. If you look at their looks now, they look little like friends who trust and sincerely help each other. Now they look like real enemies who have long hidden their real face, especially Charlotte. At the same time, she didn't allow herself too much. She chose the tactic of speaking in hints of direct words so that she wouldn't regret it later. Evelyn realizes that this is the moment when it no longer makes sense to pretend and trust these people. She is now responsible for her own safety and everything else. As soon as the assistant starts talking, the girl unconsciously remembers the situation when she saw her with her husband. It was so disgusting that now she will not be able to even sleep in peace. I wonder how this conversation will end, and if she'll admit that she saw them together, because there's no telling who's going to be worse off. At some point, the most interesting thing began. First, the girl began to hint that she would do everything possible to fire this friend. And then she asked to leave her things and go to the exit. She said that her patience had run out, and from now on, Charlotte would have to look for a new job. Unless, of course, the girl took pity on her and wrote her a bad characterization, which most employers like to read before hiring someone. Of course, there could be no other reaction. Charlotte was so angry that she didn't even hide it, although in fact, she already knows perfectly well what she did wrong. There's really no forgiveness for her, but I don't understand how the girl could fire her. She shouldn't have the right to do that. The thing is, if it wasn't for that situation in the room, even knowing their intentions, she would never have fired her. But seeing that, that's what any girl would do. I wonder what she'll do next, and also how the guy will react to it, since his lover has just been fired. After that, one of the assistants knocked on the room. The girl opened the door and asked what was wrong. The assistant apologized for disturbing her peace, and said she wanted to let you know that the letter was sent as she requested. It would arrive at its destination in a couple days. But that's not all. The assistant brought with her the ring that her mistress had recently given her. Did she really? She still couldn't accept it, and decided to take it back. The assistant feels that she is not a good enough employee to accept such gifts. In her opinion, there are those who deserve it much more than she does. Therefore, accepting the ring was wrong. After that, Evelyn suddenly wanted to discuss with her a subject that she would not be able to discuss with anyone else. She asked if the assistant believed that she was really Cordelius's daughter. The woman replied that of course, she did not even doubt it. I just hope she's not lying and pretending to be as good as Charlotte, who she's been trusting for nothing all this time. Meanwhile, as soon as she got up evening, the girl decided not to stay in her room. Instead, came up with some plan and went out late at night. She went up to some man in an unknown place. At least she hadn't been here in a long time. Very interesting. What's to be sorry for? And why she is awake at such a late hour? Meanwhile, the man saw the girl and asked if she was alone or if there was someone else with her. It turned out to be very important to him. The girl said she needed someone and asked to be escorted to him. But judging by those words, it's still unclear what she's doing here and who she's looking for. This place looks like some kind of hotel or a small restaurant, and this man, the receptionist or the person left to guard the place, he said that if a girl is looking for a certain person, they have two different services. According to him, their company can find anyone and vice versa, destroy anyone. He asked what exactly she was interested in and promised that in the end, the client, that is, she, would be satisfied and would not regret that she had turned to them. Evelyn replied that she was interested in the first option, but that she wanted him to be able to do what the second was capable of. It was a very interesting request, and it seemed that no one had ever approached them with such a request before. After that, the man gave her some kind of key and told her to go to the second room on the second floor and promised that they would send the right person there. The important thing was that she would have to blend in unnoticed. With every word they say, it becomes more and more interesting to watch what will happen next, which means that something interesting is about to happen. Only one thing is clear. The girl knows exactly what she is doing. It's a very strange place. You get the impression that it's just an outer shell. It's actually, inside there's something different going on than what it's associated with anyway. The main thing is that the girl gets what she came for. In fact, the reason why she personally doesn't want to be involved in this case. She doesn't want to be seen and suspected again, so it should definitely be handled by someone else that no one knows. At one point, she contemplated becoming more violent again, and suggested that it was possible that it was Charlotte who suggested that people destroy her in order to get rid of her lover's lawful wife. In any case, in order to avoid past mistakes, she is forbidden and undesirable to trust people, no matter how much she would like it. Because as it turned out, the closest people turned out to be even worse than strangers. Being in this room, the girl noticed that before, it was as if she had been here, because everything around her seemed too familiar. In the meantime, some guy came up to her. He asked if she was waiting for him, and hinted that the case could start right away, if she was ready for it, of course. He is ready to do his job, but before that, he asked what exactly she is interested in. Of course, he has a lot of experience, but in any case, it does not hurt to know some wishes. The girl began to worry a lot, because she has never done something like this before. She's afraid to make a mistake and began to doubt that she even need it. But on the other hand, her life depends on it. In the end, she decided that there was no turning back, and since she had come here, she had to go all the way. Evelyn asked the man to find something and try to get into a place that was best not to be seen by her. After that, she gave him the ring that the assistant had recently returned. He looked at it and even began to smile, for he realized that it might be his future reward for a job well done. He promised that he will do everything in the best way, and she cannot even doubt it. He reminded about his vast experience and convinced that the result will definitely please her. The girl will not regret that she turned to them. At some point, the man suddenly changed his mind and decided to ask for much more than this ring. He said that the girl looked like she was from a very wealthy family, so could offer much more for the job. The real manipulation has begun. He is no longer as kind and grateful as he was just a few minutes ago. He thinks he should be paid according to the risk of his work. Evelyn asked why he had begun to demand more, for just now he had been very glad of one ring. Besides, she made it clear that perhaps he was very much mistaken, and pretended that she had no relatives as rich as he thought. The girl is scared and doesn't know how to react to this. She is very curious about what she can expect from him if she offers to give something more than one ring. She is convinced that he is a very fickle person, and his opinion changes by the minute, and this is very bad. At the same second, she started thinking about getting out of this place as soon as possible, because she didn't want to cooperate anymore. She didn't know whether she should say it outright or prepare herself to defend herself if she had to. And as soon as she thought about it, some guy walks into the room and sees a girl trying to get a girl to do something she doesn't want to do. But the man doesn't notice it yet. The guy grabbed him by the necks and told him that if he decided to fight back or scream too much, he would regret it very much and probably wouldn't even be able to leave this room alive. Evelyn saw this guy and couldn't believe her eyes. Not only was he very handsome and she fell in love with his eyes at first sight, he also acted like a real prince. Very interesting what will come of it. For if it seemed that the most interesting thing began when the man began to ask for more money, then no. The most interesting thing begins now. She looks at him and doesn't realize when to react and what to say. She started to get embarrassed. Her cheeks reddened, and there was an urge to leave this room to calm down and come in again. After a while, she ventured to ask who he was and what he was doing here. Especially now, the guy replied that they already knew each other, and this wasn't the last time they would meet. Very curious as to why he thought that and what it meant. He even called her by name and said that he was very happy to meet her. The guy smiled, and after that, the girl was completely speechless. At some point, she accidentally remembered and realized that Edward was the one in front of her. But how that could be, she really didn't understand. Edward saw that she had a sword with her this time too, and he wondered why she carried it with her all the time, as if she was trying to protect herself from someone or afraid of meeting someone else. She replied that he was wrong and it wasn't what it looked like at first glance. The guy asked that she explain further if she was in the mood for it, of course. After that, they suddenly changed the subject. He started talking about his looks and the realization that she is the first and biggest girl he knows who has blue hair color and the same eye color. The girl didn't immediately understand why he had started talking about it, and in the end, she decided not to think about it. Because if he wanted to make a point, he would have done it a long time ago. Then, they simultaneously recalled how very many years ago, often saw each other and even walked in the garden a few times. The girl said that she had heard that he was studying abroad, so she wondered why he was here. The guy replied that he had some personal business and he was here for a while. Evelyn said that she hoped he wouldn't ask her the same questions because she didn't really like to talk about herself, especially in such a difficult situation, when it was better not to tell anyone anything at all. Edward reassured her and said that he would wait until she wanted to do it herself. The girl thanked him and said that he had always been a very understanding person. She liked that very much. There are very few people like that. There are almost none. After that, she looked toward the villain and thought about how best to deal with him. For while she was here, she could think of something to gain from it. Time permitting, of course. Usually she felt sorry for people, even those who were really guilty and badly hurt. But now she looks at this man and realizes that he still got off easy. Edward Bailey, next in line for the dukedom, his father and the girl's father, were best friends who saw each other every day, without exception. So, their children have known each other since childhood. Like their fathers, they also saw each other every day and considered each other real friends. But at some point, they were separated by fate. The guy went to study, and the girl stayed where she spent her childhood. Initially, she missed her friend very much and did not know when they could see each other and resume their friendship, which stopped in one very unexpected moment. Previously, the girl knew him as a very nice and calm guy, but now, it was as if he became a different person. Of course, he did not become worse. On the contrary, he turned into a more masculine and strong guy. After some time of conversation, the girl happened to remember that since they were friends before, maybe he could ask for help. Without thinking long, Evelyn asked if he could protect and save her life. The guy smiled and asked if he understood correctly that just now, she asked that he be by her side all the time and make sure she was safe. The girl said he understood correctly and said that if he wasn't interested, she wouldn't take offense to it. In response, he said something that became very hurtful to hear from his side. The guy admitted that he didn't want to do it. Besides, the girl wasn't exactly his type. Simply put, she wasn't his type. Realizing that there was no other option, Evelyn said that for something like this, she would pay any reward. She would give anything he asked, just to be safe and not be afraid that someone might hurt her. She reminded him that she has a very difficult situation, and if not for him, no one else will help her. The girl confessed that every time she wakes up in the morning, she is grateful that she can live another day that might not have been. Instead of calmly apologizing for bothering him, the girl offered to insist that he help her. On the one hand, it was wrong, because he had already given his answer and refused to help. But on the other hand, her life depended on it. Surprisingly, Edward didn't even start to get nervous. He wondered why she even trusted someone like him. It had been a long time since they had seen each other, and no one knew what he had become like. After that, the girl said a very unexpected answer. She said she had some proof and certainty that he was the one for her. She didn't even have to explain anything, as the guy immediately understood everything. She only pointed to a small sign on his clothes, which means loyalty to his customers, forbid to refuse. They immediately understood each other. I wonder what the guy's gonna say after that and if he's gonna help because he didn't want to do it just now. Of course, this is a real manipulation, but she has no other choice. As suddenly, at some point, Edward said that if she needed his help, it was enough just to say his name. The girl did not understand anything and asked to explain what it meant. He tried to explain, but in the end, Evelyn still didn't understand. She only needed to know if he was going to help her or not. And instead of answering yes or no, Edward started talking in riddles, and it made her very angry. She doesn't understand why he's doing this, because surely he also doesn't have that much time to drag it out like this. In the end, he didn't say a single word and silently left through the balcony. The girl said that if she understood everything correctly, it turns out that he agreed to help, and if so, she was very grateful to him. She promised that if everything went well and she liked the result, she would come up with an appropriate remuneration for him, which he would definitely not refuse and would be glad that he agreed to cooperate. In the end, they never said goodbye. The guy went off on his own and left her here alone anyway. It was good that the girl never heard a final rejection from him. Frandir had countless mediators. Mostly they specialized in detecting and resolving hidden conflicts. However, sometimes they took on cases that the established rules could not resolve. As the range of their assignments increased, everyone's status increased. Accordingly, the higher the status, the more they demanded reward for their work. So everyone wanted to get as many assignments as possible to become the best in their business, to get a good status and be able to earn a lot of money. Some for this took so much that you can buy a whole mansion. At that moment, the girl thought that if he really succeeded in keeping her safe, it would mean that the problem was solved and that she could start a peaceful life tomorrow. But there's something else that confuses her a bit. The guy is always talking with some kind of riddle, like it's hard for him to just answer yes or no. I really wonder why he does that. Does he have something to hide? She doesn't rule out the possibility that he may have made a deal with the devil in exchange for the power that made it so easy for him to gain good status and success in the business. But she has no proof of that, so it's too early to accuse him of it. Evelyn decided that the next time she had a chance to see him, she would ask him about it and try to find out everything. When suddenly some guy approached her, the girl asked what she could do to help and who they were. Had they been following her all this time? Though perhaps they were just guards and wanted to ask what she was doing here. Instead of answering the question normally, they started whispering amongst themselves. Supposedly, this is the one everyone is talking about. After that, a few more men appeared. We can only hope that they have no bad intentions and everything will go quietly. It turns out that they came to find out if she had seen a guy who was in a hurry somewhere and trying to remain unnoticed. The girl replied that she had not seen anyone, although in fact, she understood perfectly well who they were looking for and who they were talking about. They said that one of them was found unconscious in this hotel, and as soon as they found out about it, they started looking for someone who might be involved. They know that a guy who was in a hurry and a girl in a hoodie came out of the room. Of course, they didn't believe her words and warned her that if she didn't tell them where that guy had run off to, she would regret it very much and wouldn't go anywhere, at least not for the next few days. As soon as the guy grabbed her arm and she realized she had to save herself, she remembered Edward, and as they'd agreed, she remembered that she could just say his name, and he'd show up, unless he'd tricked her. She screamed his name very loudly, hoping that he would actually show up and be able to help her. Otherwise, she would be in very serious trouble. The girl wouldn't even be able to go home. These guys thought she wasn't calling for help, but just saying the name of the person they were looking for. At that moment, Evelyn didn't see Edward and thought that she was probably trapped and no one would help her. One of them approached her, and with each step he took, she began to doubt more and more that she would ever make it out alive at all. She realized that it was useless to resist and even closed her eyes. As soon as she stopped seeing everything around her, the horse's voice sounded, which immediately gave her some hope that everything would be all right. The girl opened her eyes and saw before her a large, very beautiful white horse, which seemed to have come for her at the very last moment. She immediately began to attack these villains. They were all scared of her and immediately began to run away. Who went where? There was panic among them. They even forgot about the fact that they wanted to detain the girl. Very curious what it was, since she named Edward and a horse appeared instead. Though perhaps his appearance will be a bit later on. As soon as everyone had run away and there were no villains around, he appeared. Edward, the one the girl had been waiting for. He went over to his assistant, stroked her, and said that it was a very good job. He was very pleased with her, and once again made sure that with her, for them, there were no strong opponents. Every time he does it, he doubts less and less that there's anyone better than him, and he's never once failed. In fact, he enjoys feeling like a savior, but he won't admit it to anyone. He especially likes helping beautiful girls, like Evelyn, for example. It turns out that he kept his word and did what he said he would do. It's very interesting to hear what Evelyn thinks about it, because just a few minutes ago, she thought she had been betrayed and cheated. Surprisingly, she was afraid to say anything to him and decided to do as he did. Evelyn silently went home and didn't even say goodbye. To calm herself down a little, she went to her office and started writing down all the things that had happened to her today. For today was a very special and restless day. Surprisingly, after all this, she keeps remembering her husband who betrayed her. Even though she hates to think that he might be in the same room with her friend, she still can't stop remembering him. It's long past time for her to accept that now, he's a stranger to her and doesn't deserve to even be thought of. Although in fact, it is not surprising because it is impossible to forget a person after all that was between them. She will remember and think about him for at least a few months and maybe more. Although most likely he doesn't even think about her. The guy has long forgotten her, and in all likelihood, he doesn't even remember and regret afterwards what I did and how I acted towards the person who trusted him. As suddenly, the girl heard a knock at the door and accidentally crumpled this sheet and threw it in the garbage so that no one read it and did not see it. Although in fact, it makes no sense, because if someone finds it, he will take out this sheet and read everything that is written there. As usual, without waiting for permission to enter, the assistant opened the door and saw the girl throwing away some sheet of paper fearfully. It turns out that she came to ask if there is any work, because she has already done everything and does not know what to do. It is very strange, because if there is no work, it is a great opportunity to see her lover. The girl recalled that just recently she had fired her and banned her from this house. She didn't understand why Charlotte dared to come to work and what she was doing here. And that's not all, in fact. The girl came with everyone in order to get some task. She came to show off the dress that her lover bought her. She really wanted to look at the look of mistress, and she wanted to succeed in it. The girl can hardly restrain herself from crying because when she was married, even Edie rarely, when he bought something like this. And now, he gives a dress to a girl who is not even his wife. Of course, she's very hurt to hear all these words and stories and wonders how she even restrains herself from kicking her out the door right now. In fact, she is often hindered by her own very mild and kind character. For if there had been another girl in her place, she would have punished the traitor long ago, and had done so on the first day. It's very frustrating to see the assistant smiling and looking down on her mistress, when in fact it should be the other way around. Each of them is clearly out of place. At one point, something amazing happened. The girl admitted that she really liked the dress and pretended as if this conversation did not upset her at all. And on the contrary, she was supposedly very happy for her, would probably help her for a different reaction, and wanted to see her cry. But in the end, nothing like that happened. Evelyn had decided that she would never allow herself to be laughed at. So all she had to do was smile and not show a single bad emotion. And she handled it very well. As soon as the girl left her office, the assistant started to get very angry, because she thought it would be different. She came here to piss off the mistress and ended up pissing herself off, which is a good thing, because finally things aren't going her way. Meanwhile, the next day came. Surprisingly, the girl slept very well. She really liked that instead of starting to cry and running off somewhere, she messed up her enemy's plan and did it her way. So she's in a good mood first thing in the morning, even though she usually doesn't want to see or hear from anyone at this time. She felt like going outside and getting some fresh air and asking for breakfast to be brought here, because it would be so much nicer and better here. Besides, the weather is very nice today, so there is no point in staying in the house where there is not such a beautiful view, incredible aroma of flowers and fresh air. As such days are rare, you should take advantage of it and go outside early. The girl found a suitable table for herself and decided that this day should start with something pleasant. She started to enjoy every moment and decided that it should always be like this. Of course, she has some not so pleasant thoughts and memories as usual, but now it's much easier for her to stop thinking about it. She starts to look around and enjoy the moment. though it would probably be until someone walked by or approached her. Hopefully that wouldn't happen, and she'd be able to eat breakfast in peace at least today. At some point she got very hot and wanted to hide her face. Right after that, some guy came up to her and asked if she was okay. He got worried and thought something was wrong, so he couldn't pass her by. The girl heard his voice and realized that indeed from the outside, it looked as if she had become very ill or had lost consciousness. Evelyn turned around and looked at him and said she was fine. She was grateful for the concern and was very glad she had people who cared about her and genuinely wanted to help at times like this. Lucas said he was really scared and already wanted to call someone for help, and as soon as he found out she was okay, he was immediately relieved. He exhaled and even smiled. At that moment, the girl thought about the fact that if Charlotte had approached her instead of him, she would have definitely started laughing and would have probably just walked on by without anyone helping her for sure. In such moments, a girl begins to appreciate people who, no matter what, care about her, and are not like some traitors. After that, they started talking about the beautiful weather, and it turns out they really love it when it's warm and comfortable outside. They hate cold weather that makes it impossible to go outside. At some point, the girl even forgot about the fact that she wanted to have breakfast. The guy proposed to go for a walk, and of course, she immediately agreed and did not resist. Lucas was excited and admitted that he didn't think she would agree to go out with him. He was honored, so he would love to spend that time with her. At some point, he began to notice that the girl was not smiling at all. He asked what this was about, because he realized that something was obviously wrong. Evelyn replied that it was fine. She didn't want to burden him with her problems. She was very pleased that he was interested in it. But at the same time, it would be right to dump your problems on him, because he would definitely want to do something about it and offer his help. Lucas explained that even if he couldn't solve her problems, he could at least listen to her and give her advice if needed as a friend or someone she could trust. The girl heard it and realized that maybe he was genuinely interested to know what was bothering her so much. He wasn't trying to promise anything, but just wanted to listen and be there for her, like a true friend. Meanwhile, the assistant, who was angry last night, could not sit quietly in the mansion and decided to go to a small building on the grounds nearby. She needs to release her energy without anyone seeing it. She began to hate the dress she wanted to show off to her mistress. The girl took it off and promised herself she would never wear such a thing again. She doesn't know what to do to piss Evelyn off anymore lately. The girl is not being manipulative and is acting much calmer than before. She began to think up another plan to finally see her tears and make her want to leave and never come back to this territory again, which she would probably never do. Now she's not someone a girl trusts and whose opinion she'll value. So no matter what she tries to do, she's still not going to succeed.